Photography rates are dropping like a rock in 2025, and even if you haven't felt it yet, it's about to get much worse. So I've been in this industry for 7+ years, and every single year, thousands of talented creatives enter the industry, and they're willing to do great work for super cheap or sometimes even free. So while the competition has increased, the rates have only gotten lower, which means cheaper clients and less profit for you. So the rules are completely changing, and most creators won't even realize it until it's too late. But if you pay attention to what I'm about to show you in this video, you will. So in this video, I want to show you exactly what's happening right now that's causing the entire market to drop its prices, how to future-proof your business so you don't get hit, and most importantly, the new way to price your services that will not only allow you to stand out against the competition, but most likely actually allow you to charge more than you're charging right now. But before we get there, we first need to take a look at where we're at right now. So the biggest shift in photography is actually currently happening right now, and it's actually a direct result of the platform that most photographers rely on, not only for visibility, but also for clients. Instagram. I mean, you've probably seen it yourself. There's hundreds of thousands of creators posting their work every single day, and just a small fraction of them are actually getting business from it, let alone charging real rates. And I'm sure you've probably seen brands reaching out, wanting you to shoot in exchange for like a 10% affiliate commission, or even offering a free stay or a free product in exchange to shoot. And it's becoming more and more common because photographers just accept it. So all that money that you spent on gear and classes and all that time you spent learning framing and lighting and composition and storytelling, all that's down the drain because some brand offered you some kind of free stay or cheap project that they can use your content literally forever. And if you don't accept, well, they'll just go find someone else who will. And on top of all of that, there's literally online courses and PDFs and even platforms that allow creators to work for free. Now, obviously, not every brand expects creators to work for free, but even the mainstream industry rates have dropped due to the increase in competition and the lower cost of gear. So if you're relying on things like day rates, well, this is your problem too. So content used to be considered a luxury that only the big name brands could actually afford. But if you fast forward to today, literally everyone needs content, so it's considered a commodity, but it's also more in demand than ever before. So if you're a freelance creator of any kind, this hits super hard because brands are expecting a lot more and they're willing to pay a lot less. So as the content marketing scene evolves, less and less brands are willing to allocate big budgets to the ad agencies or even individual creators. And even if they do, they slash the budget and they expect a lot of content to be shot in a very short amount of time so that they can optimize the budget. And that's where the main problem starts, because most creators think the only way to raise their rates and get paid more is to either deliver more content or deliver a higher quality piece of content. And while both of those can definitely be used as part of a strategy, they're not the main driving factor. And I get it, because at first it seems like a good idea. Basically like, hey, if I want to justify my rate, I'll just give them more content. But as more and more creators start to do the same thing, they also start to slash their rates. So the expectation for the quantity of content was very high, but the expectation for how much to pay was very low, and that gap starts to become even wider and wider every single year, to the point where the rates are so much lower than they were even 5 years ago. So now suddenly the internet is just flooded with tons of talented creators who are basically willing to do anything just to land a client. And it's not about delivering amazing results or being unique or having unique selling propositions. It's literally a race to see who can get the most shoots. And now brands are just overwhelmed with the amount of options because there's literally thousands of photographers that would potentially want to work with them. So creators with real expertise in creating real results for certain types of niches get drowned out in the noise. I mean, your actual value to the client, your actually main selling points are just swamped out by all the other creators who are just pitching content, so you get boxed in with all the other content creators. And if even that wasn't enough, many of the top brands actually have preferred vendors and preferred ad agencies, so even if you were great and had a unique selling point, they already have people that they've worked with for years. And why do they prefer those guys anyways? Well, it's because they have tons of experience, they know exactly how to shoot for that type of client, they know what type of content actually sells for that type of client so they can be more efficient, and then ultimately they just have better relationships with their clients because they've worked with them for so long, and it's beyond just transactional. So all that makes sense, but the problem is it makes it more and more difficult for the quote-unquote small photographer to actually land projects, let alone charge a decent rate. So how do you compete? And it's not just Instagram that's getting hit, it's other channels as well, like cold email, that has lower response rates than ever before. Because brands, and especially the big brands, are getting hit up every single day by dozens, sometimes even hundreds of creators with the same tired, overused scripts, and people are just getting tired of it. So while it's taking more effort and more creativity to get in front of your potential client, it's actually becoming harder and harder to actually engage them, let alone get them to pay you real rates. So if you're just blasting out the same email that you're not getting responses to and expecting it it to be different, well, you're just wasting your time. So something's got to change. So if you're frustrated with these creators charging super cheap or sometimes even free, and the annoying gatekeeping practices of the ad agencies and the brands where they need the preferred vendors, or even feeling like you're wasting your time with cold outreach, I totally get it. I mean, you're fighting harder for every click, every discovery call, every client, but what if there's a better way? A way to price yourself where you hold the power because you can't be compared to anybody else, and where clients understand your value, they're willing to pay it, and even at prices that are maybe even 3 to 4 times what you're currently charging. And by the way, you can actually do this on a recurring basis every single month because you're bringing in recurring value, so you don't have the revenue roller coaster every single month. Well, the truth is there actually is a way, and it's what I call the growth creator pricing. So what is growth creator pricing? Well, it's basically a complete mindset shift. So traditionally there's 2 main ways that brands value content. The first is based on time, which that can be considered a day rate, and the second is based on the amount of content you deliver, which is a per content rate. And both of these ways aren't really that valuable to the brand because they don't care how long it takes you, and they don't really care how many pieces of content you give them as long as it hits a minimum. But there's actually a third option that places the value not on what happens before you give over the content to the client, but more so on what happens after the client presses post. So check this out. You can spend 100 hours planning the perfect logistics and shooting and editing and doing all this, delivering 40 photos for a client, and the client may never use the content, or even worse, they do use the content and they don't really get any results. So the question is that content valuable? I would argue no. I mean, think about it. They invested time, effort, money into your time and your skills, and they got really nothing in return, so it's actually a negative ROI for the client. But let's say same client, you spend 1 hour on a shoot, you deliver 5 photos, so you're spending less time, delivering less assets, but that content results in, say, $100,000 worth of sales this next month. Is that content valuable? I'd argue 1,000% yes. So this concept I just explained of pricing based on value versus time or quantity is what's called growth creator pricing. And here's why it works. So it's actually a win-win for both you and the client. So you are incentivized to create incredible content for the client because the more valuable it is, aka the better results it gets, the more you get paid, and the client is more incentivized to hire you because you're incentivized to get better results. So it's this virtuous cycle. So you're not just another creator, a photographer, somebody who snaps some pics. You are actually a crucial piece of the success of this business. But here's the challenge. What does that pricing actually look like? So I know you might be thinking it's easier just to slap on a per content rate or a day rate onto your content, but actually growth creator pricing is a lot easier than you might think. But here's the thing. You can't just charge 10 grand to a client and hope they sign the dotted line and pay your invoice. It doesn't really work like that. You have to be able to convince them why paying you more money is actually more worth it for them in the long run than hiring somebody that's cheap or maybe even somebody that's free. So in other words, you need to be able to show your value up front. And this is where your pitch becomes extremely important. So the client needs context as to why hiring you is better than the cheap guys, but they also need proof that you can actually deliver the results that you're saying that you can. And if you do all this correctly, your client will not only be primed and ready to work with you, but they'll be willing to pay you the big bucks. But that brings up one more very, very important question, which is how do you estimate your value? I mean, honestly, how can you guarantee that your content will result in a certain amount of sales or something for a client? Well, you can't, but here's how I go about pricing. So first things first, you have to understand where the content is actually going to be used. So you can ask questions like, where's the content going to be used? It's going to be used for ads. How long do they need it for? What's the potential reach if it's for ads? All that kind of different stuff. So I'll just give you a quick example of if the client wants content for their website. Let's say product photography. So let's say that the client wants to use your image as like the hero image of their product page. So we're going to use this equation right here, and we're just going to have to solve for each variable. So the first one is average amount of visitors per month. So we just want them to kind of estimate that. The second one is the conversion rate, which is how many of those visitors are actually converting into sales as a percentage. And then lastly, what their average order value is. So sometimes they'll have upsells, stuff like that. So just make sure that you factor those in. So let's just say, for example, we asked the client, they said that they get 100,000 visitors a month, they converted about 1%, and their average order value is about $75. So if we plug those numbers into this equation, we'll find out that they should be making somewhere in the neighborhood of around $75,000 in revenue. Now that's not profit. They also have expenses, they have team, they have overhead, they have product costs, but they're making around $75,000 a month in revenue. Now the content on the website can affect the average order value just depending on how the website's structured, but just to keep things simple, we're going to assume that it affects only one factor, which is the conversion rate, or what percentage of people see that image actually convert into a sale. So assuming that everything else is the same, let's just say that our content raises their conversion rate from a 1% to a 2%. So it seems like a minor shift, but let's do the math. So as you can see, when we plug in the numbers here, all we're doing is raising by 1 percentage point, but it results in $150,000 of sales a month, which is a $75,000 difference than what it was before by just increasing by 1%. And by the way, this is on a monthly basis. So if we extrapolate that out to 75,000 times 12, well, that is $900,000 of additional sales that one piece of content potentially generates for the client. So just making sure you heard that. One piece of content can result in almost $1 million of extra revenue for this company. Now, I'm not going to charge anywhere close to $1 million for the content, but what I will do is I'll take what the estimate added value on the first month is, and I'm going to multiply it by 5%, which will bring us to around $37.50, which I think is a pretty reasonable rate for that piece of content. Now, if I just walked into the meeting and the client asked me what my per image rate is and I said $37.50, they'd probably laugh me off the meeting. But when I can price anchor it against like, hey, we'll add an additional $75,000 a month, which is $900,000 a year, almost $1 million, and then I drop the $37.50 number, it seems a whole lot lower, and they start to justify that number in their mind. I mean, who wouldn't want to spend $37.50 to make almost $1 million bucks, or $37.50 even to make 50 grand? It's a no-brainer. But here's where it gets interesting. So websites are just kind of like a one-time occurrence for the most part, but there's other use cases of content where they're used every single month, like ads, social media, seasonal product launches, stuff like that, where you can actually charge this growth creator pricing model on a recurring monthly basis. So you end up selling less, getting paid more every single month, and ultimately only working with the clients you actually want to work with. Now, if you want to see a full breakdown of how to build a 6-figure content company with just 2 to 3 clients total, then you're going to want to check this video here because I break it all down.